Officials in the Philippines say there are no reports of damage from debris from a Chinese rocket believed to have fallen near the country's western coast. The rocket carried part of China's new space station into orbit late last month. After the launch, officials allowed the final stage to fall back to Earth unguided. China's space agency reported Sunday that most of the rocket burned up when it re-entered the atmosphere. Most, but not all, meaning that the debris could have crashed down anywhere along the flight path. CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood joins us now from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Bill, what do we know about where and when debris from this Chinese rocket fell? And, people hear this and give us a sort of a gut check. How concerning is this type of a development?
It's really interesting. To your last question first, it's a little bit like talking about the odds of an asteroid impact. The odds that anyone will get hurt by an asteroid are extremely remote, but the consequences could be very high indeed.
Right.
And it's a little bit like that. The planet is 75% ocean, so the odds are any debris from a falling satellite or a rocket are going to land in the ocean and not hit anybody. But you never can tell. And what makes this case interesting is this is a 25-ton rocket body that the Chinese put up there without any way to guide it back, as you said. Now, Space Command, U.S. Space Command, tracks these things, everything in orbit bigger than a baseball, just about. And they said this thing came down, it began re-entry over the Indian Ocean. And as it turns out, we have reports, as you mentioned, that pieces of debris survived the burning of re-entry to actually hit the ground on the island of Borneo. Nobody was hurt, no signs of property damage, but certainly it's something to keep in mind because it's so easily preventable.
Yeah. And so to that point, given the technology that we have, why did Chinese officials allow the rocket stage to just fall back to Earth uncontrolled?
Well, I think they rely on the statistics. The odds we were just talking about. I mean, the odds are it's not going to hit anybody.
Yeah,
back
but like
in the
you said,
early days
if
of the
it
space
does,
program,
it's a real problem.
Absolutely. And back in the early days, the United States and other countries did the same thing. They didn't pay much attention to that. But modern rockets today launched by the U.S., the Russians, the European Space Agency and Japan, they equip these things with thrusters so that they can control where it comes down. If you remember the old Russian space station Mir, that absolutely would have hit the ground somewhere, but the Russians guided it into the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean, and it fell harmlessly to Earth. That's what they're going to do eventually with the International Space Station. Now, why the Chinese don't do that with this rocket, anybody's guess. It's certainly something that's generated a lot of criticism in the West. The Chinese have kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, hey, the odds are this is not a big deal. We're not too worried about it.
Well, Bill, you and I talk at length about the development of space exploration really as a positive thing. It's surging in recent years. But when we look at an example like this one, does it concern you that the possibility of unguided rocket debris could become a more frequent problem, and then that does increase the odds that there could be potentially negative, if not catastrophic, impacts?
Well, again, it depends on who you're talking about. We're all familiar with SpaceX launches. They actually bring their rockets back to safe landings, either offshore or on the land. The United States plans for big rockets like the upcoming SLS moon rocket that they're going to launch toward the end of this month, hopefully. That first stage is very large indeed, but it's targeted to land in the Pacific Ocean, or the Indian Ocean, I should say, and quite deliberately so. Again, the Russians already do this. I will say it, responsible spacefaring nations and corporations do plan for controlled reentries. The Chinese haven't yet done that. I mean, they may at some point. They certainly could. And, of course, we're going to get a chance to talk about this again in October when they launch this very same rocket again, or another version of this rocket, to launch their next space station module into orbit. Same thing's going to happen. That stage is going to come down somewhere, and we'll all be talking about this again.
We'll understand why in early times when the technology didn't exist, it happened that way. But when the technology exists, it just boggles the mind. All right, Bill Harwood, as always, thank you.